From Toronto to Tokyo, and from Thonia to Syrinx, this is The Basement, your companion to the Ready Player One novel. Join our hosts each episode for complete chapter breakdowns and deep dives into the pop culture references through a series of challenges and homework assignments. The Basement is the Ready Player One podcast for people who love things. And now, please welcome Albert and the rest of the Gunchers for this week's episode. Hello, Gunchers, and welcome to The Basement. This is episode 0008, Wonder Twin Powers Activate. My name's Albert Padilla, and this is a continuation of all the episodes that we've been doing, covering the Ready Player One novel, chapter by chapter, spending some time looking at the pop culture references. And we're glad to be back. So this is the second episode now that we've done this year, and we're full steam ahead. So without further ado, I'm going to just go ahead and bring him on now. This is Mr. Will, Mr. 8-Bit Will. Did you change your name? What's going on there? Let's pull it up. What are you today? I don't know. I was going to pull it up just to kind of see where you were at. Oh yeah, there you go. Yeah, Dr. 8-Bit Will, or Will 8-Bit. How are you doing?
Hey, not too bad. Hey, I'm looking forward to the show.
What is going on there with your screen? Hold on a second. What is that?
What?
Look at these games you got right there.
Oh, yeah. So in the spirit of what we're doing, I have all the 8-bit Dungeons and Dragons games here in front of me. Dragon Strike, Heroes of the Lance, Hillspar, Pool of Radiance, all the games. I think every week that we talk about anything related to Ready Player One, chapter by chapter, I'm going to go collect all the video games out of my collection or my collection that reference what we're talking about. Yeah. So that's all we're doing.
It's kind of like a show and tell almost. So
almost, which is an odd choice for a podcast.
Well, yeah, and that's a good point. So we're gonna try. I mentioned the Will. We're gonna try our best to make sure that we're talking exclusively, specifically, explicitly about the things that are on the screen, because we are doing these live on YouTube and Facebook now, but we're still releasing these as podcasts. So if you've had a chance to listen to the last episode we did, we kind of threw in some additional audio effects in there. I thought that worked out really well. So we'll continue to do that. That'll kind of be a special treat to listen to the podcast. You may not get that here, obviously, on the show. So let's start the show. We're going to talk about really quickly. I'll summarize what we just covered in Chapter 7, and we'll talk about quick summary of Chapter 8, talk a little bit about the narrative of Chapter 8, and then we'll get into all the pop culture references that were scattered throughout. So to start us off, Chapter 7. So Parzival has his epiphany while he's in his on his home planet or school planet of Ludus, and he realizes that that's actually the resting place of the Tomb of Horrors. So after exploiting a way to travel there without absolutely no credits whatsoever, he manages to find an entrance that looks similar to the entrance to the Tomb of Horrors, and that really pretty much just ends right there, all the perils that lie ahead at that point. Chapter 8, quickly, so with the help of a map from the Tomb of Horrors module, Parzival makes his way through the treacherous tomb, avoiding traps and monsters and collecting a heavy amount of gold pieces along the way. He is eventually confronted by Acererak, who challenges him to the best two out of three games in Joust, the classic arcade game. Parzival bests Acererak, winning the copper key along with the clue to the first gate, but before he's able to leave the Tomb of Horrors, he is stopped short of the entrance by a mysterious figure, making their way inside as well. So, and in this chapter, like, it's almost all about the dungeon, right? I mean, we don't get a lot of the oasis or any of the, what's happening in the real world, much less it's all simply focused on the Tomb of Horrors and the pop culture references. Let's talk about the first part of it, though, because he does when he gets into the Tomb of Horrors, he actually has a map that he pulls up, and I had a copy of it here. We're at some point here, a little bit later in the show, we're actually going to kind of walk through some of this here. But this is what the map looks like. I got a better picture, I promise, a little bit later. But he uses this map to kind of avoid all the pits and the monsters and all the traps and everything throughout this to make his way over to the room where Acererak is at. Throughout this, he's leveling up. He's killing monsters, and that's when he's getting XP. I thought it was interesting too, like the Oasis, and we saw this in the movie. You remember in the movie where the race was going on, and he was picking up credits, and he was kind of sliding them and transferring them over into like fuel or whatever it was. I think they kind of pulled from this a little bit because what he's doing is as he's collecting treasure in the Oasis, it's actually converting over into XP and it's also converting over into credits that he can use as well. So nice little pull that they did that for the movie. Yeah, he eventually makes his way to the pillared throne room where he sees the throne and Acererak, who's not supposed to be there, sitting there waiting there. And this is where it kind of breaks away from the D&D module. And the D&D module a little bit later, we'll see that he's actually not there. There's a tomb that Acererak's supposed to be in, but in this particular in the Oasis, he's sitting there waiting on the throne, waiting for him. And then there's this is where we get in the novel, we finally hear Acererak talk. And I want to ask you just a quick question here. Did you have a voice in your head? Or well, let me ask back up. Did you read the book? Did you do the
I,
audiobook? Did you do both? And what voice did you hear for like somebody like Acererak?
oh, I think for me, yes, I heard a voice. I read the book. I didn't actually listen to the audiobook. But for me, I think the voice was probably Mumra.
I knew you were gonna say Mumra.
No, I'm just kidding, man.
Oh my goodness.
I think there was a classic sound for a villain. And I think when you're reading Ready Player One, it's got such an 80s vibe that you kind of associate with the villains from the era. So I'm thinking probably the demon from Legend, the dude with
Oh
the
yeah.
big horns.
Tim
Yeah,
Curry's character?
yeah, Tim Curry.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know that I threw this question out there and I honestly did I had a voice in my head, but it was just I don't know, nothing in particular. I finally listened to the audiobook and I had read the book a few times before I listened to the audiobook and now I can't get the voice that Will Wheaton does for Acererak. Which kind of taints it for me because I don't know. Not that I have anything against them really. I don't know. I kind of like my own voices in my head, I guess. There's
I
plenty.
thought for your, I got a question for you. Here's a real takeaway for me is that the use of the module to get through here is the equivalent of me using a strategy guide to get through a video game,
Yeah.
which to the purist gamers is probably cheating. So I gotta know, Albert, do you support the use of strategy guides to complete a game?
I'm guilty of it. I won't say I condone it. I think yeah, what I end up doing is I try to go through the game once by myself, and then I'll use a strategy guide to go through and say, okay, what did I miss? And I do that mostly with like the Final Fantasy games. So yeah, I don't really have a problem with it. I think here, I mean, he's the prize is millions, billions of dollars, and all that. So yeah, I would have cheated too, quite
So your
frankly.
integrity's for sale is what you're telling
Absolutely,
me.
there is a price on everything, my friend. All this has a price. So the other one thing for Acererak, that was one thing about the voice, but then the other thing was the recording not allowed and all the voices that you hear from Oasis or from the within the Oasis, right? The computer controlled voices that tell you you can't do this or you can't do that. When I read the novel, that was kind of like to your point. I was hearing the voice from the Gauntlet game, right? The fighter needs whatever more food or whatever. That was the voice that I heard, and I thought that'd be kind of not
Warrior.
that.
Oh,
Yeah, exactly. Because he hears that in here, recording not allowed. When he tried to do a recording, when he went into the Team of Horrors, he was going to do a recording, so in case he died, he could kind of play it back. So, anyways, Acererak finally stands up. He tells him, "Not horses." He replies, stepping away from his throne, "Birds." And I remember reading the novel, in at least in the book, it's like right before you turn the page, and when I saw that, and when it said birds, for the first time, I honestly got really excited, and I was like, "Oh, please be Joust, please be Joust," and it obviously turned out to be Joust, but to this day, when I read that piece, it still gets me pretty excited that he's going that jousting was what he means is jousting with birds and meaning playing the game. The so the rules in playing Acererak, basically best 2 out of 3. This feels very Street Fighter 2 too, right? I mean, because you think we're going to talk about that here in a little bit, but that's another game where it is truly the best 2 out of 3. And a lot of games, at least at the time, they were all about points. Who could get the most points? Whoever had the most points won. That kind of thing. But this was definitely more in the flavor of Street Fighter 2, which coincidentally is the game that they eventually would go to. He and H after Parzival was kind of whooping up on him anytime they used Joust to settle anything or play Joust. So of course, Parzival honed his skills in that competition between H, and this allowed him to kind of have the upper hand after he had switched sides. And that is a true thing? Like I can think of games where, I mean, whenever we played co-op games, and we'll get into what you and I used to where we used to go. But whenever we play co-op games, and it wasn't just you, anybody, there were certain games where if I was next to play, I was almost hoping that a person on the right would lose because I play much better on the left, and I don't know what it is, but there was something in that. Are you the same way? Do you have a preference when you play these kind of competitive games, or does it just depend on the game
Yeah,
itself?
I prefer to be on the right. I think that's where we're best friends. Is I'd like I'm a right side guy, and you're on the left of whatever game we're playing. You know what's interesting is when I read that part of the book, I got more of a feel related to platformers, and you do see it in fighting games as well. But he
Yeah.
talked a little about being able to see the pattern in the way that he was playing. And for those that played classic arcade games, that was a big part of it. AI was predictable, even if it was some level of complex. There were always cues that you could use to maximize your score. People did it all the time, and Super Mario Brothers, the first, that's the one that pops at me. But even when we would play fighting games like Street Fighter 2 and you're playing against a human opponent, there were people that just had tendencies. This dude is just going to leg sweep. That's like his
Hmm.
move. So
Yeah.
this guy fireballs after a throw every time. Like you, the same way that we would evaluate any opponent is the same way that he's evaluating opponent here. Is we're looking for tells the same way that a poker player looks for tells when they're playing a game of cards.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good analogy. That's absolutely true. The and for us, we're I'm trying to think. We used to play dimension or diversions a lot. I mean, that was kind of the de facto place. I don't think we ever. Now, you grew up in the same area I did, at least early on. Were you ever at like or what was it? Diamond was it Diamond J's at Westlake
Yeah,
Mall?
Diamond J's was Westlake Small.
Yeah,
And then the first time, and you might have been with me that we saw Mortal Kombat was at Rocky J's, the
Rocky
pool hall.
J's. Yep, the
Yeah,
pool hall.
over off
Yep,
in
I forgot
Bandera.
about them.
I think that's a church now.
How
They're gonna need a lot
appropriate.
of holy water, a lot of holy water to clean that place up.
Yeah. The so that was one place we went to, and then prior to that, back in the early like mid '80s, the places I remember going to were Aladdin's Castle. So they had that at Ingram Mall, and I've seen Ernie Klein wear a shirt. He's got an Aladdin's Castle shirt that he wears, and so I've been trying to get my hands on one as well, just to kind of be like him.
You should
But,
look at
yeah, no, I should look into that. So Aladdin's Castle was one, Diamond J's, we talked about Diversions, that was a little bit later. I think that was mostly in the '90s that we spent our time there. Trying to
yeah,
think if we went.
Robotar after that. Robotar is the one that was
Oh,
right next to
yes.
the recruiting stations at Westlakes.
Yes. Yep. And then the other one that I've mentioned, I think on this show, there was a place in the early '80s, probably about '83, that was off Southwest Military Drive or Military Drive here down in San Antonio, and there was a place called Great American Hot Dog. Do you remember this place?
I do
Were you here at that time?
not know.
Okay, so you get a hot dog for 39 cents,
Calm
and it.
down, old man.
I know,
Easy,
but
boomer. I got a
that.
hot dog for 39 cents and a Coke for a dime.
Yep, it was like IKEA prices.
What is
So listen, they had a line. All the arcade games were around. Like if you imagine a square, like a box, okay.
right?
Around the top was where you would sit. That was the seating area, and then you kind of went down into this pit area, and you would buy your hot dogs down there, and all around the area that you bought your food was where all the arcade games were. So it's 39 cents for a hot dog. All they sold were hot dogs, hence the name Greatest American Hot Dog or Great American Hot Dog. I'm conflating that with the Greatest American Hero. But Great American Hot Dog, 39 cents, and all the arcade games were down there. And so parents would sit up top. They had a kind of overview look of the area down below, and they could see where everybody was running around doing it. But I mean, that was the place to go, and we would beg mom and dad to take us out to Great American Hot Dog, and
Well, if you're looking for sponsorship, you're about 30 years too late, sir.
yeah, I don't know whatever happened to them. I actually did try to research to find out what happened to them,
I
and
think they were invaded by Wiener Schnitzel in
the
the
tra-
40s.
yeah, the trail went cold pretty quickly. All right, after Acererak, after Parzival gets a second win, Acererak pounds the side of the cabinet. It explodes into a million pixels, and at that point, he takes the form of Anorak, which is his avatar. He being Halliday's avatar, and he gets the copper key. And on the copper key, there is an inscription that reads, "What you seek lies hidden in the trash on the deepest level of Daggerath." we're going to talk about here in just a few minutes as well. And he immediately knows exactly what this is referencing to, right? And he's got a hunch that he needs to travel to Middletown, which is a recreation of Halliday's hometown. It's out on another planet, and that somewhere there he suspects that he's going to find a TRS-80 computer, a copy of the game. I'm sorry, Dungeons of Dagerath, and somewhere in that will present itself the first gate. All he needs to do now is get out of the Tomb of Horrors and make his way immediately to that area to Middletown. But as he's about to leave the tomb, he is confronted with the shadowy figure that's about to walk in as he's walking out, and that kind of brings us to the end of chapter 8. So give me your overall thoughts here on chapter 8. Again, I know we're not really talking about the dystopian culture or aftermath or anything. It really is just focused on, at first, the school, and then primarily all about making his way to the actual tomb itself and making his way through the Tomb of Horrors.
Right. I think we talked about this offline before, but this is the chapter that challenged me the most because it requires that suspension of belief in order to get past the first limerick, right? So that took the entire galaxy worth of people 5 years to crack the code on that, which to me, I think if you have a random search engine, you could have broke that in under 5 minutes. But the second one he does in an afterthought of less than 30 seconds. He knows exactly where it needs to go. So you can tell the whole process is accelerating quite a bit.
Yeah. Yeah, I know, exactly. And he does find that one pretty quick. And so let's get into the references. And we're going to start with one of probably, man, I don't know. This was like my favorite one for a lot of bad reasons, but we're we're going to start with Hawk the Slayer. I'm going to let you take this one, at least give us the overview of what's behind it and everything else, and we can talk about maybe some of our favorite moments and our not so favorite moments. I mean, just look at this poster, guys. It's a doozy. Go ahead.
Yeah, so this movie was a British, what they refer to as sword and sandals film. It was directed by Terry Marcel. It has Jack Palance, who was at the ripe age of 61 while he was playing the villain in this movie. To me, this is the most ridiculous thing. I mean, it's different having James Earl Jones play Darth Vader, who's relatively the same age, but Jack Palance having a sword fight at the end of the movie with John Terry is just insane. And Bernard Bersal's always also in it. It's about two brothers who are clearly 40 years apart,
yeah.
who are fighting for control of a kingdom after the death of their father. One's good, one's bad. It's a total Star Wars ripoff. The main character, being Hawk, has an ability referred to as the Power, which has a striking resemblance to the Force. As you watched this movie, and I know you recently did, and don't get me wrong, out of all the movies in this genre, this is my favorite sword of all of them.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
It is my favorite sword. Only because the average teen could find more than one use for a hand holding a ball. With that, what were your favorite parts of the movie, Albert?
So oh my goodness. So all full disclosure, I honestly had never seen this movie, even after I saw it when we were doing the basement last year, 2 years ago now, whenever we stopped doing it. I watched only part of it because we were coming up on it and I was trying to get ahead and all that. I didn't get through all of it, but I remember thinking, wow, I can't wait till we get to this because I am really going to love talking about this movie. And I, for whatever reason, just never got around to watching it, and that's shame on me because it's such a treat. And so ahead of this movie now, I've seen it about three times, which I can't even say a straight face. Like, it's so over the top. Like, I can't even believe that this is like right up there with like a fanfic film, like something you would see people do these days. The couple camcorders running out. I mean, it's the stuff that you and I would do.
Exactly. They blew their entire budget on Jack Palance. I mean, John Terry, the guy who plays Hawk, this was his first role. Yeah. But he's in a ton of 80s movies. He's in Full Metal Jacket, The Living Daylights, and he played in the John Malkovich version of Mice and Men, which, for those listening, came out the same year that Albert and I were in high school. I actually directed Of Mice and Men for our theater department. It was only slightly worse than Hawk the Slayer.
And I played George, so there you go.
Tell me about the rabbits, George.
But and I actually John Terry, he's in Lost. That's what I remember from like Christian
Oh,
Shepherd.
that's
Like,
right. He's in the ER also. Right?
yes, that's right. Yeah. But okay, so it's like I can't the lines between favorite and worst or least favorite parts are pretty much blurred. It's all the same to me because I love it and I hate it. But first off, the music in here. Okay, so now we're doing the live show right now. You're not going to hear the music. As a bonus treat, when we release the podcast, I'm going to lay down the music track to Hawk the Slayer right over all of our discourse here. So you're welcome. But the music itself is just over the top. There's so much flute. There's so much jazz flute mixed in with disco. It distracts. I mean, I would say it pulls you away from the movie, but given the movie, it probably fits in just fine. I don't know that it's really that big of a distraction. I thought the fight scenes were pretty funny. I like the I don't know if it was an homage or what, but or making fun of the good, the bad, and the ugly. But you know all the stare downs they would do before they had their sword fights. That was good stuff. And then that last fight, I mean, just Palance. I mean, he's 61. This is the joke that they ran like through the 80s when he was doing push-ups at the Academy Awards and all that. I mean, God bless him. This dude is like, I mean, I don't know.
I don't need no fancy cologne to know that I'm a man. I just need skin brace. Hey,
forgot about
so
that.
here's a weird thing about that movie. So the final fight scene was actually in length. It wasn't choreographed. It was only 45 seconds long, which is why the entire last fight scene with Jack Palance and Hawk is in slow-mo from 3 different angles because he
Right.
he didn't have it in him, bro.
Yeah, this is a great movie. So, and it's a cult. I mean, I guess we call it a cult classic, but you don't hear a lot of people talk about this, and I think it's a shame. Like this, to me, like the Beastmaster is one that, again, I have some of the same issues. I love that movie, but I really, objectively, when you look at that movie, it's not a great movie.
You take that back. You take all that back.
I know you're a big fan of the Beastmaster, but it's the same kind of relationship. Like I love watching this movie, and I think it's great. I mean, it's kind of a sign of the times, and this is really what we talked about on a previous episode too. There were so many. I mean, we were like oversaturated. The market was oversaturated with these types of movies like Conan and Beastmaster, Hawk the Slayer. I'm trying to think now. I'm drawing blanks. We listed them out on a previous episode, but there's a bazillion of these things.
Yeah, anything by De Laurentiis, Sword and the Sorcerer, which has a really cool sword. It's got that dude's got the 3 swords and 2 of them shoot out. That's impressive.
Exactly.
Which I think you mentioned the 80s hair rock group Wasp appear in that film. Nice.
I forgot about them. The Elven Mind Stone. And so did you see that they were trying to release a sequel to this as well at some point? Like it was in the works.
Yes.
It was going to be Hawk the Destroyer or something like that. Yeah, Hawk the Hunter a few years ago.
That's exactly right. Jerry knows what he's talking about.
Yeah,
there was a Kickstarter campaign for it, but yeah, never happened.
It never happened. I'm trying to think what else stood out here. There's some lot.
I do like the 6 degrees of separation between the giant, the actor who plays the giant. I don't know what his name is, but he also played the Cyclops in Kroll, which is one of my favorite movies in this genre.
Yeah, we did cover Kroll in the past there too. But yeah, Hawk the Destroyer, I would have been all for that. I don't know. Hopefully this thing will resurface at some point. Maybe. I don't know. We'll see. Red Sonja, thank you. One. That's another one. I forgot about that one. And the list goes on and on. There really are a lot of, and there's so many of them too that if you have an Amazon Prime account and you're up late at night, let's say 2 a.m, and you just want something to do, go browse their selection of these movies that came out from like 1980 to about 1985. There are no end to them, and most of them are absolutely inappropriate. Like there's so much TNA.
The Barbarians, isn't that the name of a movie? The twin dudes that were like bodybuilders.
Builders, yeah, the black hair. Yep. All right.
Terrible movie. Can't wait to watch it.
All right, let's move on from Hawk the Slayer and talk about another one of your favorites, the Beastmaster.
So, look, we're not going to have anyone talk negatively about Dar for the next 40 minutes. This dude is a legend. This is a great movie. This is not a real original story. I got to know, Albert, is this the worst version of Dr. Dolittle that's out there?
Yep. I think just slightly worse than the Eddie Murphy version. Or I don't know. Well, the more recent Robert Downey Jr. version was kind of bad too. But
So if you don't know the plot of this movie, it's fairly straightforward. Dar is born. The prophecy says that he's going to kill the king, who is Rip Torn, his crazed uncle. Anyway, these three witches with really hot bodies, but their faces are all buttered up, stick them all up inside of a cow and walk them outside and then birth them. It's the worst scene in 80s cinema. And then he is set free, and eventually, what is going on there? Okay, all right.
that was supposed to be the symbol. That was the.
Oh, that okay.
I didn't draw it right. Sorry.
See, Albert wrote something on his hand and put it onto the camera, and I thought it said, "This isn't the boat, Penny."
Not Penny's boat. No.
So this is not a clone of Conan. This movie actually was released 3 months after Conan the Barbarian was, so they were in production at about the same time. In fact, Dino De Laurentiis was so impressed with the Beastmaster that he offered the director the ability to direct Conan the Destroyer, but he turned it down. This ended up being his only studio production for it.
You're talking about Don Coscarelli?
Yeah, there you go. I knew his first name was Don, but I've been drinking, so I wasn't going to try this last name. I don't want to offend any of your Italian listeners.
I love that Mark Singer is like the specimen of human beings, right? I mean, he was like well fit for this movie, and we saw a lot of cheekage going on. It was almost too much at times across the board. And then like I saw this movie as a kid, and then rewatching it, it's like, wow, there was a lot of Tanya Roberts in this movie too.
Yeah, like Oliver. Like Oliver's in the movie.
Oliver is in the movie. That's right. You got John Amos before he made it big at McDowell's over in Coming to America. That was great to see him. And JR brought up the animals. Like, well, first off, let me just say this: there were definitely animals hurt during the making of this film.
So
like,
the title of this movie is the most ironic thing about the entire film, because there were no Beastmasters on the set. They didn't actually have the budget to have any proper animal trainers. So they were just borrowing random animals from the zoo, from exotic collectors. And well, you can't say that there were no animals injured during the filming, or that there were no cast and crew injured, because you could just go through all of the examples of issues they had during filming. For example, the bear in the one scene that comes out.
Oh, yeah.
During the filming, attacked one of the guys on the set. He had to go to the hospital. Yeah, the director commentary for this movie, he goes through all the issues they had with the animals because they weren't trained, right? So they're like, yeah, the bear went crazy, but no, the bear just went bear.
Bear.
What bears do. It's so you'll notice that the tiger was supposed to be a black tiger like he is in the movie, but they couldn't find one, so they just took a regular striped tiger and then threw a bunch of misclero on it to dye it black. Eventually, this led to its death. There are tons of things in the movies where you can see him licking the misclero off of his fur, and then he's got like
Are you making this up?
No, dude, go look at it. In fact, the hawk couldn't even fly. They had to rent a hot air balloon and drop him from 300 feet in order to get those shots of him flying. And going back to your hot dog story, the only way they could get that dog to lick Dar's face was to rub cold hot dogs on his cheeks. Take that, great American hot dog.
I thought that dog was really dead. Like, that is the very realistic looking dog that he's carrying there that he puts on his father. Yeah. Like, it looks real. And that's why when I saw that, I was like, okay, wait a minute. Something else is going on. Like, I'm pretty sure that ferret was truly drowning at one point in the quicksand. I'm pretty sure that dog died. I'm pretty sure they did cut open the cow that was laying there on its side.
Yeah.
I don't know. But, it was a little disturbing.
Yeah, that's a ridiculous scene. It disturbed me on a number of levels. But still, a great film. What I love about this movie is that there's so many practical effects. I mean, there's a ton of things that you would have had to do in CGI today that they were just doing practically. Right, that tiger is on set with him the entire time. Now, granted, right off, camera, there's a guy with a rifle pointed at that
Just in
tiger's head.
case.
But there is a real tiger there. So that's impressive. Oh, here's a little trivia for you. Last one, because I know we got to stay on it. That
Yeah.
river that Dar runs through when he's doing this cool
Yeah.
sword fight, that's
Back and
the
forth. Yeah.
yeah, that's the same river where those kids died while they were making Twilight Zone the movie. The one that
Oh,
in
where
the
the
third
helicopter had the accident and chopped him in half and all that?
yeah, same place, same filming location.
What in the world? Well, there you go. Yeah, this is another one of my favorite movies. I know we've been
Right.
kind of bashing it, but I mean it's a great
I
movie.
wasn't bashing it. Impressed.
Okay, I
You
was
can't get
laughing
away
at.
with that stuff today. You can't just be, losing 25 ferrets during filming.
Well,
As some people show up.
need another ferret. Bring one onto the set. But yeah, and the ferrets were like, what was it Kodo, Poto, and then the dog was Toto, I was expecting the cat to be the same thing, but I think it was like Roll or
Yeah,
something
there
like
wasn't.
that.
There was
I don't know. All
there
right.
were a lot of available vowels for the naming.
We didn't talk about the Kappa. I thought that was a cool weapon. It reminds me. I always liked the Kappa
Mm,
weapon.
yeah, that's good.
Like
Yeah,
hopefully we had the Kroll blade in the Ready Player One movie, and I don't know.
yeah,
Maybe we'll see the
that's my
Kappa.
favorite medieval weapon. Not real practical unless you have someone you love with you.
Sure.
Hey, art. The art of filmmaking is pretty impressive when it comes to that because that CGI film in Kroll with the fire is my favorite part. And as
Mm.
much as I love you, Albert, I'm not sure how much spark we would get going if we were trying to kill something.
Yeah. No, I don't think so.
Like,
We'd be toast. All right. Let's go to the next movie here, and I think it's the last one that was in the novel, anyways. And this was the mention of Excalibur, and specifically the mention. I forgot that we were supposed to be talking about the actual lines here. So just for reference, it says when I for the first two movies that we talked about, my flashlight reached into the darkness ahead, flickering off the damp stone walls. My surroundings made me feel like I was in a low budget sword and sorcery flick like Hawk the Slayer or the Beastmaster. That's for the first two. And then for this one, for Excalibur, he says, when I put on the suit of armor, it shrank to fit my avatar perfectly. Its gleaming chrome appearance reminded me of the badass armor worn by the knights in Excalibur. And before you get started, let me just get this off my chest. I've always liked the armor in this movie. Like, it still stands out. Even some of the more modern versions, and I'm thinking of like Night or First Night, but more modern versions of of the telling of this movie, or just in general, they really did a great job. And I've got I just one thing that I want to talk about later about the armor itself. But take it away, sir. Go ahead. What's going on with
no, you know
Excalibur?
about the armor. That's fine. Because again, that's a practical effect. What most people remember about the armor is how it glistens, similar
Yes.
to Excalibur. That's a practical effect on set. They're using. They're actually using spotlights of both green and white, in addition to the lenses that they were using that were a blue-green. In fact, there was an Academy Award nomination just for the use
Yep.
of lenses on this movie. No, you feel free to talk through Excalibur. I find it to be the least funny version of Holy Grail that's been made.
Oh,
None of the punchlines landed. It was terrible. Much like this podcast. I do
yep.
have a sword with me today.
What in the world is going on here? Hold
You
on.
check this
Why are
out.
you doing this? Let me. Well, now you're gonna get highlighted. So
Highlight. Okay. Oh,
there you
yes.
go. Show us what you
Oh,
got there.
so I actually did some research on what Excalibur would have actually looked like in history. So I guess, Albert, how old were you when you found out that King Arthur wasn't a real person? Because I have a doctorate and I was today years old when I found out he wasn't a real person.
No, we had this. We went through English class. We talked about this
I'm
in high
oh, did we
school.
talk about it in high school?
Yes,
Oh,
yes, we did.
I haven't had a drink since then.
Yeah, it was when we were covering Once and Future King.
Ah, yes. But I did find that this sword has more in common what Excalibur would have looked like in the era than what they typically show from the Iron Age weapons. Not that I'm any kind of sword expert. This was actually for my Commodus costume for Halloween 2 years ago.
Oh, I was gonna say, where did you get? I thought you picked that up exclusively for
Oh,
this podcast tonight.
oh no, 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 no. Well,
All
we don't
right,
have that kind of budget.
no, we have
You
no
have like
budget.
3 people on your Patreon, and I'm cool.
Yeah, yeah, that's very true. Okay, so let's quickly about this movie. So it's got it was directed by John Borman. And John Borman, like he was originally going to do like it's funny how he got here, and this is partly just because it is interesting. It really I'm going to go down a rabbit hole, but that's what this show is, right? The so John Borman originally was going to do Lord of the Rings, and he actually called up Tolkien and was like, "Hey, dude, I want to do your movie." Tolkien said, "Okay, what do you want to do?" He's like, "I want to do live action." He's like, "Great, I was hoping you would say that." They were on board. I think United Artists was the movie company that was picking that
Yep.
had picked it up. So United Artists was going to be releasing this thing, and then they went into some financial troubles. They had a number of hits or movies that just tanked. I
Yeah.
think Exorcist 2 was the last one that kind of
Heretic.
was
Yep.
yep, nail in the coffin kind of thing. And so at that point, the gentleman, I never forget his name now, over at United Artists, who had told Borman, "Hey, you've got the movie rights. We've got the rights. I need a script. Let's put this together." He was gone. So he left United Artists, and United Artists like, "Well, we don't have the money for this anymore." So that got scrapped. Eventually, that got picked up, and that turned into this, was it 1978 cartoon, Lord of the Rings, that came
It did,
out?
but I think the only part you missed in that story is Tolkien died in the interim.
Oh,
So
yeah, that's right.
Tolkien never actually got to see the cartoon version, which he would have hated because he didn't want the movie to be animated.
Yep.
Yeah, and the the director of Excalibur was so disappointed by the decision that was made that he decided that he would never watch the animated version just out of respect for Tolkien's wishes.
No, interesting. Yeah, I didn't know that. And so the movie itself is it's kind of weird because it's like it starts saying it's in the Dark Ages, and then it's really not because they're wearing the armor that they're wearing. I think I read in here that there was over 100 suits of armor that were created by this man Terry English for this movie, which is an insane amount of armor for the movie, and it really shows all the way throughout. I guess some of the other more interesting things is like the choreography. It always bothered me because it never really looked realistic to me. Like it didn't look. Well, I shouldn't say that. It didn't look like stage in a good way. It didn't look choreographed in a good way, and it wasn't until recently that I found it actually wasn't.
Was
Like they
not.
just got these people out there and said, "Go."
With accurate.
And action. And it was again like the movies we were making, we were just making it up, improvising, ad libbing as we went along, and that's what these fight scenes turned into. So now when you go back and watch this, it kind of makes sense as to why some of these don't really look. I mean, it's war and it's chaotic and it's supposed to kind of be like that, but that makes a lot more sense. I always enjoyed the soundtrack as well from this one. I think Trevor Jones is the one who's credited for the soundtrack. And there were other movies out there, like again I mentioned First Night
Mm.
with Sean Connery. I don't know why I'm laughing at that. Richard Gere, I think, was in that as well. There was the 2004 version of King Arthur. I don't like any of the Guy Ritchie movies. Sorry if that offends anybody, but I
What
know
the?
he did a
What is
version.
happening? Calm down. We're not gonna have this kind of hate on this
Pick the
podcast, sir.
headphones up and walk off stage. But visually, this movie is great. Like all the things that you mentioned, I thought visually this is pretty astounding. It's great to watch. It's really nice to watch. I found it boring as a kid at parts, and as I've gotten older, I've really come to enjoy it and like it a lot more. And we have forgot to mention, I mean, it's got a bunch of people in here like Helen Mirren,
Schindler,
Oscar
Kaiser
Schindler,
Soze,
yep,
Jean-Luc Picard.
Jean-Luc Picard's in this.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
it's got
don't
a
know
great
what those actors' real names are, but it
Liam
does have
Neeson.
those movie characters.
Well, that's been kind of the running joke on here. We usually go by the names of famous character they played, and not the actors themselves. But anyways, yeah, this is it was a great movie. So let's move on because we're going to talk about Joust. So this is a game that was developed by Williams Electronics in 1982. It was designed by John Newcomer, who you and I had an opportunity to meet. We met him in 2018 at Game Fest here in Austin. And let me see, I got that picture pulled up. I do. There you go. So that's John Newcomer right there. He's a gentleman, and we're kind of showing a picture now. Can you see that now?
Okay, hey,
There we
there I am.
go. Hey, look at that. So there's John Newcomer. He's a gentleman on your right, not the gentleman on the left. But yeah,
Thanks.
yeah, you're welcome. Just for that clarification. And look, if you look back there at Pico's Pete's, that's the place that last episode we had those. Well, hold on now. I'm jumping ahead. Pico's Pete's. That's the place where we had those metal mugs. Do you have yours tonight?
I do not.
I don't
I'm not
either.
even trying to pretend that I'm hiding what I'm drinking tonight.
Okay, great. Crown Royal. But Pico's Pizza is where we got that. Anyways, I know you got that particular game signed, the NES game thing signed. I had a chance to, I got a couple things signed. I got this guy right here. This is Joust for the 2600. It's in a case. It says to Albert and the Basement, Jay Newcomer. And then what I've been trying to do is go around, and I've picked up this book as well. So this is The Art of Atari. And inside here, It's just literally a collection. This is by Tim Lepetino, which, by the way, if you haven't had a chance to look at this, it's basically a historic picture book of all the Atari artwork and games and cartridges and stuff like that. I had a chance I got him to sign this. Let me see if I can go to the page here. This is the Joust section. I don't know how that's coming across.
Uh, it
Yep.
looks good in video, but
Yeah,
the
not so much in
audio,
listening.
yeah, it's not.
But
I'm gonna start narrating when you're showing
that's
things.
fine. That's fine.
And now Albert is reaching for a book. He's looking down.
In this one, it says to this one, it says to Albert, keep flapping Jr. Newcomer. So I was pretty happy. I'm pretty proud of that. I mean, he's a great guy. He's a very
I didn't
quiet
see the
guy.
I didn't see the L in there
For what?
in the keep flapping.
Oh my goodness. Yep. Okay, it's there. Trust me.
These are less funny if I have to slow down and then explain them.
I know it actually is. All right, so let me go back to this cover here. So let's talk about the premise. So, and I think Ernie Klein did probably the best job of this. And there's a couple things he left out just in the interest of time and not having to go through the whole game. But he says Joust was a classic 80s arcade game with a strange premise. Each player controls a knight armed with a lance. Player 1 is mounted on an ostrich, while player 2 is mounted on a stork. You flap your wings to fly around the screen and joust with the other player, and also against several computer-controlled enemy knights who are all mounted on buzzards. When you crash into an opponent, whoever's lance is higher on the screen wins the joust. The loser is killed and loses a life. Whenever you kill one of the enemy knights, the buzzard craps out a green egg that quickly hatches into another enemy knight if you don't scoop it up in time. And then it says there's also a winged pterodactyl that appears once in a while to wreak havoc. And that's essentially what happens. I think the parts that he left out is that each wave or level had a number of like tiered platforms in it that you would have to fly up and I'm explaining this as though you've never seen Joust. I'm assuming if you're watching or listening to this show right now, you've seen or played Joust. But yeah, it had the different platforms. Interesting. One of the cool game design concepts I thought was if your opponent and you came at the exact time, right? Nobody was higher or lower than each other. You'd bounce off one another, which made for some interesting dynamics. So you kind of got bounced around like a bumper car on the screen, which I thought was cool. And then also, there was if you went off to one side of the screen, you came back on the other side of the screen. So if you went too far left, you'd appear on the right side of the screen and vice versa. So, but let's talk about Newcomer just a moment because he's got an interesting story. And this is what we talked about. We talked to him, or at least I did, when we were at Game Fest. He started off as a toy designer. I think he was making games or he was trying to come up with toys. And that really wasn't going anywhere, I guess. He saw the future and saw the future was going to be video games, and so he left that particular line of business and decided to go work and try to make video games. And so Williams hired him, brought him in to kind of like manage his creative team and come up with game ideas and concepts. And he kind of had a couple different ideas of out there. I mean, he spent a few days coming up with different concepts and things, and he landed on this idea of wanting to have a game that wasn't space based because that was everywhere. Right? Everybody was doing space games. I mean, we had Defender, which was huge for Williams Electronics at the time. There was you name it, any number of space games that were out there. But he wanted to do something with flying, and originally he was going to do like a eagle that was going to fly. That looked a little awkward, and so he landed on doing storks and ostriches, which seems kind of weird too, right? But the other thing about this all is like if you think about the game as it is today, I mean, I would have loved to be in that room when he was pitching this because it almost sounds completely absurd, in terms of the game. But then you play it, and it is heralded as one of the best games from that golden age of arcade games. I mean, it's very hard to find flaws in it, and there is definitely a science and a craft that comes to playing this game, which we'll talk about a little bit here as well
Well, I
in just
think
a second.
early '80s games were not predicated on having a great story. I mean, look
True.
across all of
Yeah.
them. Outside of Defender, I mean, it's difficult to come up with a storyline for any game. Like even if you look at the first Mario Brothers, not Super Mario Brothers, but the arcade Mario Brothers, it looks like it was built on what could be considered a similar engine to Joust. And the game formats, the screen, the layout's the same. The I can move from one side of the screen to the other and come out the other side. It has some of the same elements that you would see in Joust, except obviously it doesn't have storks and ostriches.
Yeah.
But that game doesn't make any sense at all. If you tried to pitch what is happening, say in Super Mario Brothers, right, one of the most famous platformers ever, describe that and have it make sense to no one who's ever heard it before. It's
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, you got pipes and plants with teeth, and I mean, you name it, turtle shells,
Yeah.
whatever.
Well,
Yeah.
thank God you could just show them the movie, like, and
Oh,
then they know what was going on.
the other thing about this too, and as far as the design, like the inspiration for Joust, and I don't know if you know this. This is one of your favorite movies. I know we talked about growing up a lot, but Flash Gordon and the Hawkman. And I don't know if it's a combination of the Hawkman and the rocket cycle that he's riding in. I never really dug into that or what, but he does explain. I'm looking at this picture right now. It looks like those are the Hawkmen coming in. You want to do
Mm.
your line? You always do your line.
Well, who wants to live forever?
First
Hawkmen
live,
die.
die. Yeah,
You gotta
there you
cue
go.
the Queen music when we do that part. Like when you're
Uh, that's
that's
Boss Nass, by the way. That's Brian Bless that plays that.
that is the best science fiction movie ever made. My poor wife has been subjected to it dozens of times. I watched Ted just so I can hear the music.
Yeah, well, that yeah, and that's a great movie. It really is. I do love it. It's now a true cult classic. You know, by all accounts. I mean, it's not something that you would throw in and wow people with. It's kind of on your own closed circles. But all right, so let's talk about the game itself. Now, of course, this was released on every video game system, every video game platform known to man at some point or another. And all the versions kind of varied over time. There was a sequel that was released. There was Joust 2. Oh, I'm drawing a blank on the name. Survival of the Fittest. Came out in '86 though, so this was like 5 years after. And if you think about it, in '86, the arcade scene was really starting to change at that point, right? Things were starting to dwindle down. This is on the tail end of the golden age of arcades. But and the game really, I've never played it, and for the longest time, I thought, man, how come I can't find this game? Well, one, there weren't a lot of them that were made. Two, they weren't purchased because of arcades were starting to suffer. They weren't making as much money. Nintendo was out. That was starting to kind of impact arcades. Or home systems were starting to impact arcades. And interesting enough, and I think we saw this when we were at Celebration last year at Galloping Ghost. I saw the game. I think that was the first time I'd ever seen Joust 2. But the one thing that caught my eye that I never really realized was that it is a wide vertical screen. It's not a horizontal, it's more of a portrait screen. And that's kind of cool because it gives you more, I guess, more height to play around in the levels, and the levels were a little bit longer and taller. But what it did is when they tried to translate that to a home system, you lost something there, right? Because we don't play on screens that way, not back then, anyways. So that was again, Joust 2 was the only, and they've tried to do other ones. I mean, I don't know, they've never done like a part 3, and for the most part, again, this has continued to be released on just about every system, including mobile games. But I did want to talk about somebody else we met there, and I don't have a picture of him. Do you remember meeting Lonnie McDonald when we were there?
Yeah, the world record holder
Yeah,
for
yeah, he's got the
yeah.
world record holder. He's got a website, and it's not up to date. Like the last update was in 2013, but he's got a website where at one point he was going around the world, I guess, or the nation in the U.S. here, and he was playing every Joust game that he could, trying to accumulate 1 billion points. I think is what he was doing. I don't know if he ever finished that. I thought it was an interesting concept, and the website looks pretty, pretty well put together. It's just there hasn't been any updates to it, but we did get a chance to meet him, got a chance to see him. He is the current. I think he's got the Twin Galaxies record for highest score at 935,000. That's a first man challenge, though. So let me make that clear. That's on one coin, one man. He got up to 935,000, which is pretty darn impressive. And when we were at Game Fest, I don't know that we saw him do anything but play. Like he was sitting there the entire time. And I've got pictures of him, and I should have put him on here, but I've got pictures of him. But I never got a chance to really talk to him because all he did was play Joust the entire time. But it was pretty impressive to watch. Did you get a chance to watch him?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean that's what we're there for. Total nerd out. Watch some people better than us play arcade games because I only had one joust tactic, which was to mash the fly button. So I was hurtling at a high rate of speed across the screen and hope
Right.
that I would randomly land on something and kill it. That was it. I did that for 22 seconds, and then it was someone else's turn to play. That
Yeah.
was
20 seconds. That's your approach to a lot of things, by the way. Just so most people don't know.
nasty.
The
You're
uh,
nasty.
The other thing that's interesting is Lonnie McDonald he's not the Twin Galaxies tournament setting single player record holder. He's got 1,134,000. In first place is Donald Hayes at 1.7 million. That's quite a big difference. Like there's a big gap between first, second, and third, and then it really falls off after that from fourth on down the road there. So last thing I want to throw out there too, there actually was a cocktail table version made of Joust, the original game. If you go out on, did I put a picture in there? I don't think I did. No, I didn't. There's one on eBay. I found it for sale right now. It's $2,500 if you want to buy the cocktail sit down version of it. And the reason why is because most of those cocktail tables, you would face your opponent. They were, or the other person, I should say. On this one's actually a side by side, which is it's kind of weird. They basically just took the arcade and just flattened it straight down, and that's what you got for your cocktail
That's
table.
inappropriate for social distancing. I can't
Absolutely.
support the use of that game.
All right, I think that's all I had for Joust. I mean, it's a great game. It continues to be a great game. It's obviously super important with regards to this story. And all right, let's talk about our next reference. And here we go. Now we're getting to the good stuff. This is the all new Super Friends Hour. And so I've already spilled the beans on this. But let's see. It says the reference here is he waved the skeletal hand at the throne. There was a brief flash of light accompanied by a transformation sound effect, which I'm pretty sure he lifted from the old Super Friends cartoon. Now, I don't know with certainty that this is exactly what he's talking about. But when I read this,
there's like 5 versions of this, right?
Sure, yeah.
73 and whatever it was, that 10-year time span. This sits somewhere in the middle of them.
Yes. Yeah, and the sound effect I am going to assume was lifted from these two people right here, the Wonder Twins. And if you've ever watched the show, they would put their fists together. It would make a sound. They would say,
Wonder Twin powers, activate! Shape out an eagle!
Form of water.
hence the title of the show. And at that point, they would transform. So before we get into that, because this is going to be all kinds of stuff going on here, but before we get into that, just quickly, this was obviously the Super Friends show. It ran from 1973 all the way to 1986. So a total of 9 seasons, 93 episodes. Now that wasn't concurrent. They took some breaks in there. The first season that ever came out was between 73, 74. It took a break, came back between 77 and 78. And that came back in a lot of strength and momentum because it was riding on the tails of the Bionic Man, $6 Million Man, Bionic Woman, right? That had a huge influence on the popularity of the Super Friends in the late 70s. There were some other shows in there. It went on to like 78, 79, 79 to 80. There was the World's Greatest Super Friends. They had the Super Friends Legendary Superpowers, and then the Superpowers team Galactic Guardians, which was the final version of it, which was in 85, 86. So it went through a lot of iterations, and the Wonder Twins kind of bobbed in and out of all of these. Like they weren't consistently in every one of these seasons or every one of these series. It just really depends. And so the first one that they were in, kind of like you mentioned, I think it's this one here that I had up. This guy right here, the all-new Super Friends Hour, that was from 1977 to 1978. Okay,
right.
so
I think if you look into it, the reason that you see these two play in and out is because there was a struggle between the toy manufacturers during the first couple of seasons. They weren't really licensed. There were no licensed toys available for the Super Friends, the original Super Friends. But then as the show progressed, you had Hanna-Barbera and Mattel, and both of them had different in-games because there were really no products to sell before that other than increasing awareness for the comic books that were out and the like. So the first early Super Friends, leading all the way up into this version of the Super Friends, was a very cartoony, feel-good approach. There's absolutely no punching of people. There's no punchings of robots. They're doing like weird things like the Arctic Circle is turned into the Amazon. They're doing issues like that. There's no, ironically, those dark DC kind of issues that we would see later. And in fact, if you look at the way that it progressed after we got rid of the Wonder Twins, it did get a lot darker. And then the last couple of seasons, you start seeing, like, including the death of Superman in one of those episodes.
Yeah,
So
you're talking about the Justice League at that point?
they were the Galactic whatever.
Oh, yeah.
What's funny is they never refer to themselves as the JLA in the cartoon, even though there was clearly a Justice League of America. It was on their communicators, it was on the building, right? But that's not the reference they use. They always use Super Friends, and then they use the whatever it was, Galactic Super Power Group. I don't know.
So I want to focus on these guys because they're okay. So
Why?
because there's just too much here. My goodness. I mean, this is right up there with Hawk the Slayer, honestly.
This is
Okay, so if you're not familiar with the Wonder Twins, so that's Zan is the guy, Jaina is the girl, Gleek is the blue monkey, the blue space monkey. They were so they were created by Norman Maurer, and their original names were Dick, Jane, and Mighty Monkey. They then took it and they changed the names to Tarzan names. So it was, if you think about Tarzan, they just took the tar off and then called him Zan. They took Jane, Tarzan and Jane, and just turned it into Jaina. And then Squeaks was the name of the monkey at that point, the space monkey. That got eventually changed. So then when they finally settled, it turned into Zan, Jaina, and Gleek. So it went from Squeaks to Gleek. They were,
you officially know more about this than the creators of the show.
No.
Nobody cares.
Hold on, it gets better.
No, it doesn't.
So they were extraterrestrial twins. They were a species known as Exorians. Their parents died at an early age due to a plague because of their powers. They were hard to sell off to anybody. So nobody could adopt them, right? So eventually they found their way into this space circus. I'm not making this up. They found their way into a space circus because they were freaks along with the other space sideshow freaks. And that's where they found their space monkey Gleek. Eventually they cross paths with Superman and they make their way to Earth. And then they get adopted, for lack of a better term, by the Justice League. And then they become like the interns over at the Justice League, and they get sent out and on some of these missions as well. So aside from that, if you look at them, and to me, it's obvious. Maybe it's, and I kind of had this, again, another epiphany moment when I found this in my research. They were based on Donnie Marie Osmond. Like the look of them is like Donnie Marie Osmond, which, again, if you're thinking about this time frame in the late 70s, that Donnie Marie Osmond were huge. They even had their own, variety show at the time. But I can see where they were kind of going with this. Now, the powers, this is where it gets just completely off the wall. So Zan could turn into any form of water, and that was it. Jaina could turn into any kind of animal that she wanted. And I was going to do this game where I was going to come on here and say, okay, well, you're going to have to guess if whether or not what I'm telling you was real or fake in terms of what Zan turned himself into. I couldn't come up with anything more ridiculous than the real truth. So there's some things on here. So let me show you. So this is kind of like the de facto. This was their go-to, right? So she would take the form of an eagle, and then he would take the form of water, and then the monkey would go grab a pail, and he'd jump into the pail, and then they would fly, and then, I don't know, hilarity would ensue. They would somehow win the day with this, right? That was one. So this is their go-to a lot. This happened quite a bit in the show. This is an octopus and a unicycle. I don't know. I didn't watch this episode, but I can't imagine how or why they were able to get out of anything, or much less solve anything, becoming a unicycle. And she ends up riding on this thing, like with the octopus legs, and that's the form they chose. Okay, so that's that one.
That makes
Here, what is this to you?
I can't. So for those at home, I am currently looking at a man-shaped phallic symbol the size of a space rocket. I'm going to say it's a water missile of some sort.
Yeah, it's a water rocket, and it looks like she's boarding.
Yeah.
I don't know, but he's awfully happy here.
It always seemed like whatever they picked was so entirely convoluted. They just, like, there was an episode where he turned into like a giant wave, and I'm thinking that's 90. That's all you need. Just keep going. Stop turning into a puddle that somebody would slip on, and
Yep.
She would turn into a mosquito, so the monster would be swatting his back. You're like, look, turn into a T-Rex. You to turn into a wave. Let's
Just
get this
wipe
over
everybody
with,
out. Yep.
including the monkey. Just keep going.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Hey, so Albert, I got a question for you. What? So of all of these, and Albert continues to show ridiculous.
This is
photos.
my last one, but go on. Give me your question here.
Okay, here's the question. Right, so this is a pair of characters that were made for the Super Friends Hour. As I'm sure you're aware, being the nerd that you are, there were also a number of superheroes, proper superheroes, that were created for the show. Amongst those, and most of them, there's no nice way to put this, were just created to bring diversity to the Super Friends. They didn't even try with most of the names
Nope.
of these superheroes, like Samurai.
Samurai. Yep. That was the first one that came to mind.
So there's 5 of them. Which one of those is your favorite and deserves his own movie?
It was Samurai. That's and honestly, it's the only one that I honestly recall was Samurai because I love the Japanese thing. Shogun was out in the 70s and all that. So I remember him. I'm trying to think like I'm trying to remember what some of the other ones are. Give me do you have the list in front of you?
I don't, but I mean my favorite is going to be Apache, who is like
Okay, I do.
with a little more motivation. Like I love that he would just sit there and he'd do his little Amasihu Mahaku. And then he would like get really big. I don't even know what that means. To this day, I don't know what that means. But there was
I forgot that he said that. He yelled that out right before
that was his whole thing.
He turned it on.
That's it. That's all he had. So who are some of the other ones? There was the Mexican dude, El Dorado. That was his name.
Oh my god, no, I don't remember that.
Power was, but he had a real Nacho Libre vibe going on. There was Black Vulcan.
Yep.
And I remember Black Vulcan because the guy who did that voice was Blaster in Transformers. He was Winston in the Real Ghostbusters. He did a lot of voice acting.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's others that I'm forgetting that were equally racially insensitive, but those are the only ones I can remember.
There was and I mean I credit to them for trying to do that. I mean I get it. The comics were doing that at the time, and they were. I mean, think about it. Late 70s, early 80s, nobody was doing that. Well, the cartoons were. G.I. Joe was doing that. These guys were doing that. But yeah, some of those characters were just.
Joe also the same voice actor.
Yeah. So I want to wrap this up. This is probably the most egregious one that I found. She turns into a seagull, and he turns into a gondola. So like you find on a ski lift. So that's an ice gondola, and Gleek jumps in this, and I don't know where this goes, but it was.
I like the way you say gondola.
Yeah, gondola. I'm not a skier. A skier. How about that? I'm not a skier. There was I didn't get a picture of. There actually is one where Jaina turns into an ostrich. So kind of on point, right? Because we're talking about Joust, but she turns into an ostrich. He turns into an ice sail, like a sail itself. He then mounts himself on top of her. Then the monkey jumps on her back, and they all jump onto a skateboard, and they race down the boardwalk in that manner.
That's insane.
I'm not making that one up. Again, I couldn't come up with anything funnier.
It actually sounded right there like you were reading me a Mad Lib. Like, I need a noun. Give me an adjective. Okay. You're on a boardwalk on a skateboard. Get out of here.
All right. Just 2 more things on this. We're not done talking about the Wonder Twins. We're not even close. So, the Adult Swim.
A new podcast just on the Wonder Twins.
On the Wonder Twins. Adult Swim did a parody of this called "The Adventures of the New Adventures of the Wonder Twins," and it is for adults. It's not for children. And if you get a chance, go watch those. I think they're actually pretty funny. But here's probably the more interesting thing about the Wonder Twins: the fist bump that they do. So Time Magazine did an article about this, and they were trying to. And this is around the time that this is when you remember when Barack Obama and Michelle Obama did the fist bump. And it turned into like this big thing where people were like, "Oh, they're the presidents and the first lady. They shouldn't be doing fist bumps. And what does that say about us?" And blah blah blah. Right? That's what spawned it. It spawned this question of like, where did the fist bump originate? So Time Magazine has an article. You can go out there and pull it up where they get into this, and it is unclear as to where it originated. It is one of two things. It either originated with Fred Carter of the Baltimore Bullets back in the late 70s, or guess what? It originated with the Wonder Twins. It's a chicken and egg thing. They don't know if the Wonder Twins inspired him or he inspired the Wonder Twins, but it's unclear as to what it is. But they could be credited with the very first official fist bump. And so
I'm not sure I buy that. That sounds like fake news. But of course, we love to act like us Americans invented everything.
that's very true. They're
Yeah,
not even American. So
we're only 300 years old. If you ever go to Europe, what I find amazing is that what we think is old is nothing. Like, I went to the Tower of London probably 10, 12 years ago, and we're walking around the Tower of London, and there's these excavators that are digging into a portion of it, and we're like down where the dungeons are, and we're like, wow, did they find some new artifacts, this new area? They're like, no, they're building a KFC down there. That thing is 10 times older than the Alamo. Like, people are living in structures older than the Alamo as just an apartment.
yeah.
It's amazing how we look at time and we go, oh, well, clearly it only goes back to maybe the bullets or
Yeah.
these two alien. Get out of here, America.
Yep. We are sure full of ourselves. That's for sure. Let's move on to Street Fighter 2. All right. So the reference here, the last time we played Joust, I had rubbed his nose in defeat so mercilessly that he flipped out and vowed never to play me again. Since then, we used Street Fighter 2 to settle our disputes. So Street Fighter 2 came out in 1991, developed by Capcom. The full name was Street Fighter 2 The World Warrior, which we would see in the title screens of the game itself. It was produced by Yoshiki Okamoto. The premise is you beat the crap out of each other. I don't even know how else to explain it. You got three types of kicks: medium, low, medium, and high. You've got three types of punches that you would use. There were special moves that you could do. You could pull off in combination, that kind of thing. It had a whole cast of characters that we can talk about here in a second. Now, before we do, just for those of you listening or viewer, this is a game that you and I had. Like, we had this in high school, and we played the crap out of it on the Super Nintendo, and it made its way to the Genesis. And I think it still holds, if I'm not mistaken. You might be able to correct me on if I'm wrong, but I want to say this was like still the best-selling game on the Super Nintendo at the time, or at least maybe all time.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
I did.
I mean, it was huge. It was absolutely huge.
I think most people don't, especially if you're probably in your early 20s, you can't understand what a phenom this game was when it came out. Just this game may have, in some ways, contributed to the decline of the arcade, because arcades largely became about fighting games after this. So many clones were released after this.
Mm-hmm.
And virtually every arcade started turning into just a row of either first-person shooters or fighting games that were attempting to replicate the same experience that you got when you played Street Fighter, which was amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was. I mean, it is credited as...
Who was your go-to?
The go-to for me was probably Ken, because I was all about, funny enough, I was all about the American. There were two in here. I mean, Guile and Ken were the Americans here. And yeah, they were the only two that I really played. Later on, once I got better at the game, I started venturing out to some of the other characters. I particularly liked Dalzium, or I don't even know how to say his name. I don't think I ever learned how to say it. Yeah.
That's how I say it.
I always liked him. And then and just in this game, I probably didn't venture too far from that. How about you? I don't remember what you played.
So I
typically Chun-Li?
Yeah. Chun-Li was like the easiest play for if you're playing somebody with no skills whatsoever.
Just
Chun-Li
smash the kick button. Yeah.
Yeah, just keep mashing buttons for 22 seconds and hope something good happens.
Right.
Just
there you go.
Forward. Yeah, so Chun-Li or Guile, those were the two that I played most of the time. And I probably had the toughest time when I played against players that had Balrog as their guy.
The boxer. Which we're going to talk about the name here in just one second. Quickly, though, Chun-Li, let me see. Her background, at least in this game, says a Chinese martial artist who works at Interpol as an Interpol officer seeking to avenge her deceased father. And then I said Ken. Where's Ken's at? Ryu's best friend, greatest rival, and former training partner from the United States. His personal challenge rekindled Ken's fighting spirit and persuaded him to enter the World Warrior Tournament, as well as feeling lackadaisical about his fighting potential due to spending too much time with his fiancee. My gosh, he's got a long history here, or a long backstory.
So, for those that were playing, I always thought that Ken and Ryu were basically the same character, but you could play Ken against Ryu and not have the different colored costumes. That was the only reason they existed like they did. Were there any material differences between the characters' abilities?
To my knowledge, not in the first. In what we're talking about is Street Fighter 2, just plain old Street Fighter 2. To my knowledge, no, there was no difference. In like Championship Edition, I think they added some things and kind of started, and now they're they're still very similar. Even like in the most recent ones for like the PS4, they're still very similar, but they do have their own special moves, especially, right? And then they kind of specialize. Ryu's was more about the Hadoken, and then Ken's special move and his specialty was kind of like the Dragon Punch, right? That eventually turned into that.
Disappointed you didn't make the sound.
Hadoken. Yeah, there you go.
That didn't sound right either.
Well, that's the best I got.
Do it one more time.
Hadoken.
No, that's funny.
It's close enough. In my head, it sounds great.
Hadouken!
Hadouken! I like the vibrato that I was using.
That sounded like the tone for Toasty on the
from Mortal Kombat.
Yeah.
No.
All right.
That's not what I was going for. Okay, so you would do best 2 out of 3. We don't need to really talk about any more than that. We talked about Street Fighters in terms of what we played. One interesting thing that I found, and as part of the research, I didn't know this honestly, the special moves, the combinations. That was all accidental. So when they released the game and they were putting this, or about to release the game, I guess when it was still in development, they were going through and having people do testing on the game, right? And it was there they realized that if they chained a couple of these button commands together, they kind of got these combo moves to come off, and they went, wow, this is kind of unexpected. We didn't know the programming would do this. And then they just ran with it. And this is what really, if you think about it today, like if you think about every fighting game that came out in the 90s and even in the 2000s and even today, like most fighting games, this is what they're predicated upon. You have different combinations that you string together, and you've got ways to break those combinations and all that. But this all started with Street Fighter 2, and it really started off purely accidental and innocently. This is not what they were expecting to do.
Look at the way video games evolved after that. When we started talking about the clones, it was like each clone tried to take one element of Street Fighter and really take it to an extreme. Just like Killer Instinct really took the whole combo breaker to the nth level. So
yep.
Played that game, you got hit with the right combo and you didn't have a break point in there. You were never gonna.
You watched. Anything. You were a spectator. Yeah, you were just a spectator at that point. No, that's a good point. That's exactly what they did in the special moves. We talked about those. So the identity crisis. So in Balrog, that was his name in the U.S. He was the boxer. In Japan, his name was M. Bison, which was supposed to be Mike Bison, which obviously was a play on Mike Tyson. If you look at his picture there, you really can't tell that's Mike Tyson. But for legal reasons, they had to change the name, and so that's why M. Bison became Balrog. And then I think Balrog eventually, or M. Bison became, what's his face down here? This guy with the hat.
Main antagonist of the game. He's the final boss.
Yeah. And then Sagat was like the one from the first Street Fighter. By the way, did you play the very first Street Fighter? Did you ever see that? They used to have it.
Mash the button. It was at Rocky J's too for a while. It was in the far left-hand corner of the place.
So did every one of those have like the big buttons, like the big 8-inch buttons, or did they ever release one with just a smaller normal button?
They may have, but everyone I ever saw had like that rubber cover that when you mashed it, like the button would take like a half second to reform
Pop
itself.
Up. Yeah, I remember that very well.
Terrible game, by the way.
Oh my goodness, hold on. So let's talk about the movies too. Yeah. So there were a couple movies that were, there was actually more than one movie. There's 2 official movies, and then there was some stuff that they did that was kind of loosely based on Street Fighter that came out in Hong Kong. We're not going to get into that because it doesn't even make sense to me. I could not make sense of where the heck this series went. But what we know is that we've gotten 2 versions that have come out here, at least in 1994. There was a Street Fighter That was the one that you see here on the left that had Jean-Claude Van Damme, Raul Julia. There was a video game that came out for like the Sega Saturn, the PlayStation, I don't know, a couple of other systems. And then there was the more recent one, which I know that it was out, but I didn't realize that it was actually, I thought it was like a direct to video, and I think it actually went into theaters, which was surprising. And this
Mm,
is the Street Fighter, what is this? The Legend of Chun-Li. Did you see either
yes,
one of these movies?
of course I did. So I recall seeing, because of course I love the first Street Fighter movie because, well, hell, I mean, we're huge Street Fighter fans. What I remember most about seeing this movie is I was in the military at the time, so I saw this movie on in a theater on base, which means I had to stand for the national anthem before the movie
Oh,
began
really?
to get me right into the spirit of it. And I was so, and so I saw this movie. Claudia, my wife, came with me. So when she came with me, she was a huge Raul Julia fan because she liked what was it?
Adam's
Uh,
Family?
Adam Sandler. So we watched this movie, and I'm hyping it up. I'm giving her all the background of all the characters before the movie starts, and we watched that steaming pile. 2 hours. I'm just shaking my head the whole time. I couldn't believe I stood at attention for 3 minutes to watch this movie. It was ridiculous.
It had Ming-Na Wen as Chun-Li. I'm trying to think. Kylie Minogue as Cammy. I forgot she was even in. Yes, that was Kylie Minogue. Yeah, the
I
singer
I
and
didn't know.
actress. I mean, she's done other movies. Wes Studi as Saget. Do you remember that? I should have brought
No,
pictures of these.
no. I went
My
through
goodness.
a whole session of electroshock therapy to remove portions of this from my memory.
Now it did well. I mean, budget was 35 million, and it ended up making 99 million. So I guess once you figure out, you take out like the costs and all that on top of the tickets and sales and whatever else, it was profitable. They
Well,
never did another one.
let's see what how it worked. It was probably like 88 million in the first weekend, and then made $1 a week after that.
That's probably true. Yeah, there's the devil's in the details, but
Yeah.
they somehow squeezed 99 million out of this sucker. Now the other one though, on the right here, the 2015 version of Street Fighter. I'm sorry, not 2000. Is it 2015? No, 2009. Legend of Chun Li. Now that one budget was 18 million and box office was only 12 million. So they took a $6 million loss on this
Yeah.
movie.
So I actually prefer that movie. Have you seen that? Have you seen that?
Oh, don't tell me you're going to prefer this one over the one.
Jean-Claude Van Damme?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, man, that movie's it's terrible.
Why? Is it good? Is it bad? Like I can't find anybody that's talking good about this movie. Like I don't know. I didn't look up the Rotten Tomatoes or Cinema Score ratings on it, but
So the Jean-Claude Van Damme movie is terrible in my opinion because they had such great source material to work with, and it's probably the time that I finally realized Hollywood hates video games. They don't even care. They don't play them. They don't
right.
they don't even they just look at the cover art and say, I think I got it.
I
I'm
got
ready.
it. Yeah.
Let's get
Mario
in.
Brothers, we're looking at you.
Yeah, let's just make a movie. The Chun Li movie, I think people are probably disappointed because it's not a huge action flick and it's a lot of story and a lot of development there. But I way preferred this, and in production value, it looks better. It's not as cartoony and over the top as Street Fighter the movie is. It doesn't have as many pastels. I guess that just makes it better.
That's probably true. This had I'm trying to think like who's in this. The only person that stands out when I'm looking at this cast list for the Chun Li movie is Michael Clark Duncan. I guess this is before he passed away, but that's he
They
played
killed them
Balrog.
with big love, boss. Killed them with big love. That's still like one of the best lines.
Yeah, I don't know. This is I'm trying to think what else to even talk about here. I don't have anything else. I mean, these movies they're out there. Again, there's a number of other ones that came out like City Hunter and stuff like that, but I'll have to watch these. I really need to sit down and actually watch these. I've not seen either one. I've seen a lot of bits and pieces of the Street Fighter movie. I've never seen the Street Fighter Legend of Chun-Li movie.
It's a good. It's a Sunday movie. We should
Yeah.
watch it.
All right, we'll plan
So
that.
JR's got a good point. I mean, you can't talk about these without talking about
Oh my goodness, no.
Dragon movie. Hey, that's got an all-star cast. Just so you know, you got to watch anything that's got Alyssa Milano in it. I mean,
Uh,
you just have to. You can go
yeah.
all the way back to that Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. And
Commando.
that's when I fell in love with
That's when I felt that's so funny. We were just talking about the other night and we were watching that movie and I said, this is when I knew I was straight. Like this is the moment. When I saw that movie, Alyssa Milano, I'm all in on women.
Yeah,
Okay.
I thought so too, but earlier you were talking about Dar's cheekage the entire time we were talking about
Mark
these.
Singer. Mark Singer's a fine specimen of a man.
Like, okay, I mean, that's what we're gonna. I'm cool with it, but
No, I
I'm gonna keep
promise
your
you. I
shirt
just
on if it works for you.
he kept up. We kept in shape. I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. Okay. All right, it's enough of this stuff. We're getting. Let's talk about our next two references, and we won't spend too much time here because there's this is the reference says it suddenly occurred to me just how absurd the scene was. A guy wearing a suit of armor standing next to an undead king, both hunched over the controls of a classic arcade game. It was sort of the surreal image you'd expect to see on the cover of an old issue of Heavy Metal or Dragon magazine. So for those of you that are unaware, Heavy Metal magazine, where we've got a picture up here on the left hand side. This was a magazine that ran from 1977 to 1992. Then it ran again in 92 to 2014, and it is still around. With I think Grant Morrison is the editor in chief, and he's like, I only know Grant Morrison from some of the stuff he did at DC and some of the Marvel stuff that he did and some of the comic books that he wrote. But I didn't realize he was this one. The magazine was still around, and two, I think he was like the editor in chief now. But it was founded by Leonard Mogul. And the premise of this magazine was really, it was just kind of a comic book magazine that was focused on bringing comic, sci-fi, cyberpunk, steampunk, artwork, comic work, and that was aimed more to adults. And the inspiration came from a French magazine that was out at the time. And I don't have the name in front of me right now. But they basically took what they were doing in France, brought it over to the U.S. They kind of weeded out some of the more really risque kind of material because I don't think that it was more tasteful is what I gathered from some of the feedback I was looking at when these two were kind of paired up against one another. But the other thing that I found interesting too, there was obviously a film that was released in '81, Heavy Metal. I've seen that. I should not have seen that as a kid. I did. There was another one they did in 2000, Heavy Metal 2000, and David Fincher was trying to get another one released in 2009, and that never panned out. And what he ended up eventually releasing was Love, Death, and Robots in 29 that just came out last year. And I remember they made a big deal about this movie when it came out, and that was kind of it was done in the spirit of Heavy Metal. So it was really, you could look at it as like Heavy Metal 3 or the third version of the movie, even though it didn't have the actual name. Before we move into Dragon Magazine, for me, I was not allowed to pick up this magazine. Mom and Dad were well aware of what it was, never got my hands on it. And so I never really watched it. I never saw it. I had friends that had it in middle school and high school, and that's how I saw it, but I never really had a copy. Did you ever follow this thing?
So, not the magazine, but I mean, it was just a collection of stories. I think probably more influential in my life was the '81 movie. I think if I look at the '81 movie, it was really opened my eyes to what animation could be
Yeah.
because we were in a society that was really familiar with even graphic novels. Even though we were comic book readers, graphic novels weren't as huge as they are now, and certainly not foreign printed graphic novels. So heavy metal actually gave an opportunity for illustrators that we otherwise wouldn't have seen in styles that we had never seen, both the magazine and in the movie. And I think after that, we started becoming far more open to anime and different types of entertainment. I remember I can make a clear correlation between the '81 seeing heavy metal and then enjoying Akira after that, which I know you and I have both seen at least 100 times.
Billion times, yeah. Yeah, no, that's a great point. It really did. Like, and unless you were watching or keeping up with like some of the animation out of the '70s and '80s, this really was kind of your entry point to a lot of that, opening your eyes up that there's more to animation than the stuff that we were getting from like Hanna Barbera, which was a lot of what we as I think Americans grew up with, especially as kids. We were just spoon fed that level of animation all the time. Stuff like this, like you're right, this stuff kind of changed or opened our eyes to it. The stuff that we're going to talk about here in a few, both like the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon, the Toei animation, the intros to like Transformers and GI Joe and all that. It was like, what are we seeing here? Where is this coming from, kind of thing. And yeah, you're right. A lot of that was kind of spawned out of the heavy metal magazine.
Yeah, and I think tying that heavy metal music to that art form let people know that hey, you can be edgy and be into cartoons and animation.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be this pastel, to your point, Hanna Barbera world. It can be telling real stories. It can make you emote. It can make you care. It's
Yeah.
great.
No, yeah, it became a viable media platform to kind of tell a story and not just looked upon as a kid's thing or
And before
whatever.
we sound too sophisticated, and breasts, there were lots of breasts in
There
this magazine.
were in this magazine, my goodness. Like I was trying to find
I also found it compelling that they were making such a great piece of art.
right, nope, it was boobies.
Full frontal nudity.
There was a lot of it. And I was trying to find pictures like this was of pictures to include. I'm like, nope, can't include that one. Nope, can't include that one.
You'd have like a friend showing you the magazine, like, "Hey, you think she's hot? Um, she's half horse.
Yeah,
I can do it.
I can get behind that. I can get, yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Just to get on Dragon Magazine, this was from 1976 to 2007. This is the magazine that ran. Originally, this was the premise of this magazine. So this was like the internet for us. If you played Dungeons and Dragons during the 70s, all throughout the 80s, and even into the 90s, right at the beginning of the 90s, before the internet was out there, widely available, this was how you got your updates. There were you would get new material, new campaigns, new adventures, that kind of thing that were released as box sets and all that. But if you play Dungeons and Dragons, you had a subscription to this magazine because in this magazine you would get new spell variations, new spells altogether. They would give you new magic items that you could work into your campaigns, new monsters to work into your campaigns. Give you like campaigns itself. So Forgotten Realms, which we've talked about when we talked about the Dritz Jordan character in an earlier episode. This Ed Greenwood's whole campaign for Forgotten Realms started in Dragon Magazine. So you waited for this magazine to come out because it had all kinds of stuff that you could throw in there either as a player and use if your dungeon master allowed you to do it, or as a dungeon master, you could incorporate into your existing campaigns and really kind of breathe new life into the campaigns themselves. Originally, this started as a magazine called the Strategic Review. After about 7 issues, that got scrapped because it was Gary Gygax was trying to cover everything about wargaming and everything about D&D and just felt like, it's too much. And so he kind of splintered those off, and that eventually became The Dragon Magazine. They dropped the later down the road, and it just became known as Dragon Magazine. So I don't know if you remember, well, I used to have a whole collection of these along with Dungeon Magazine, which was the counterpart to this that was really strictly about dungeons and stuff that you could use to create dungeons and all of that.
Or, Game Masters Dungeon Magazine, as I recall it.
Yeah, there was more. Yeah, you're right. It was aimed more to Dungeon Masters than anything else. But yeah, and there's some great covers on here. A lot of great artwork. It was kind of sad to see this thing go. Really, it was Prince dead, and Heavy Metal Magazine again still going on. So there's something to be said there. But this eventually did die off here back in 2007.
I love RPGs, but once you could play them online, I really didn't RPG anymore. Although there's a couple of channels on YouTube where they've got some really good D&D players, and they've got guys that genuinely love to play D&D and are voice actors that are doing amazing games out there. But mainly just in the storytelling. I mean, that's really where the money's at. Their ability to tell stories is fascinating. As they were playing, I was watching them play through a mission, and as they were going through the module, I was thinking, well, they're using a lot of words I don't remember using when you and I would play Dungeons and Dragons. And if you look at like the character sheets that you and I used, I don't know when the last time you looked at a character sheet for D&D is.
It was last weekend, but go on.
Yeah. What in the world? I don't know what. I ended up in this YouTube spiral watching 9 hours of how to play Dungeons and Dragons now because I didn't understand the things that are on the character sheet.
There's a lot of
We're 6 attributes,
There's a lot more on the character sheets these days than there was in the past. I will say that. But
incredible.
Yeah, in 5th edition, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but 5th edition I really like. I like it more than 4th. 3rd was cool. 2nd was probably my favorite. But anyways, yeah, I'm with you there. It is when you boil it down, it's not nearly as complex as the last 2 iterations, but it is more complex certainly than 1st and 2nd edition. Okay, and to your point, if you want to go see Dungeons and Dragons 2 on YouTube, there's places on YouTube, but also go to Twitch. That's where it's really starting to gain some legs and grow. There's a lot of Twitch channels out there where they're doing live action role playing games on Twitch. So always fun to watch. Okay, let's talk about this one just very quickly because I'm not an expert on this subject, but this is the Star Wars throne room, and let me give you the reference here. It says, "I recognize the music. It was the last track from John Williams' original Star Wars score used in the scene where Princess Leia gives Luke and Han their medals, and Chewbacca, as you recall, gets the shaft." And so we're talking about the throne room here on the Yavin base, and this is the image here that I think we're all familiar with this. And
Albert, what is this film you're showing? Is this some
I
kind
believe
of
this is a film. Yeah, I think this is called Star Wars.
the?
Mhm. But I got a question for you because we recorded a Cantina cast just last night, and we brought this up because we were talking about the Rise of Skywalker and the medal that Maz hands Chewbacca at the very end. We got into this discussion about whether or not that was she giving that as oh, now it's yours and it's kind of still a shaft to him, or was it this is something that was significant in your life because it was a big turning point in your life when you guys together became a part of the rebellion and he's no longer here and that sort of thing. All I want to ask you at the time, did you ever feel like, one, that Chewbacca got the shaft by not getting the medal, and then two, does he look pregnant to you? Because he's always looked pregnant to me.
No, I think he did in the first movie for sure. He looked pregnant most of the time. But yes, he certainly got the shaft. Frankly, I didn't notice the first probably dozen times that I saw this movie that he didn't get a medal. I mean, the droids didn't get medal, and freaking R2 got shot in the head. So,
right. It was his purple heart or his blue.
The point of Star Wars is that ultimately these droids are sentient, right? Lando sleeps with them when he can, right? So he's sleeping with them before this movie takes place in the timeline. So the way I look at it is, yeah, the Wookiee should have got one. The droid should have got one too. There should probably be more people up there anyway, right? What about Bridge? She doesn't get any love. Yeah, these two dudes get the love, right? There should at least be an in memoriam sign of all the dudes who
that died.
And all the dudes should just be on a big list. They should be showing a slideshow of them in the background in memory. Heck, we were doing that in 2000. Oh wait, no, this is a long time ago. It's not in the future.
Nope. Your timeline's all screwed up, buddy. Sorry.
Jeez, I keep forgetting all this already happened.
Yep, it already all happened. All right. Well, that's. I don't know. I don't really have opinion. I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other whether or not he should have got one or not. I think he should have got one. I would have wished he had gotten one, but
she gave it to him as a just one of the many inclusion nods, in my opinion. We need to make all of this right. We need to explain the background of every inanimate object in the original trilogy. I don't care what it is. They're going to release a movie that has a backstory for the tree in the background of this frame.
It will. It'll happen. Maybe they only had 2 medals. Sorry, guys. We only have 2 medals left. We gave them all out last week, and it's got to go to these guys.
Yeah,
I don't know.
We buried it with the dead dudes.
Okay, let's move on. We're going to talk about Dungeons. Okay, so here's the thing about Dungeons & Dragons. In the interest of time, I wanted to touch on a couple things, but I actually really want to do something with this for either Patreon or as a special kind of thing. But because this is one that really is important to me, so much that I've actually So what you're seeing here is the animated series. I'm going to show this. I'm showing the DVD version that I have, which is
Albert shows the DVD.
Yeah, and it's really cool because it comes with your own little animated series handbook here that I'm showing now.
Albert shows the handbook.
It comes with this little insert.
An insert is shown.
Then it also comes with, I don't know what this, this is the episode guide.
Albert displays several pages of the episode guide.
And then finally, it comes with the actual DVDs, which they're probably going to fall out. Yeah, they do fall out, which let me make sure these don't pop out here. But this is they did a really great job. And let me blow this up here.
Oh, yes.
Wait, where's your
have you
voiceover?
Oh, no, I was going to stop that I thought if I stopped saying anything, you'd stop showing things on the pod.
No, I'm not going to do that. All right, so let's talk about the cartoon just quickly. This was the reference. Stop it. The reference is, and before I could ask what I was supposed to do next, and I could, or where I could find the first gate, his avatar vanished in a flash of light, accompanied by a teleportation sound effect I knew was lifted from the old 80s Dungeons and Dragons cartoon. And so this sound, if you've ever watched the cartoon, is, I mean, it couldn't be any more clear. And I'm going to put this sound effect into the podcast as well, so you'll hear it at this moment now. Okay, so that's the sound effect. This was this cartoon came out. It ran from 1982 to 1985. There were a total of 3 seasons, 27 episodes. The very final episode was never released, which I want to touch on shortly here. It was produced by Marvel Productions and TSR. It had Willie Ames from Charles in Charge, from Buddy from Charles in Charge. I'm trying to think it had Peter Cullen in this. He played Venger, who's obviously Optimus Prime. We know him. It had Megatron, Frank Welker in here, who played Uni the Unicorn of all things, and a number of other people: Dan Mose, Katie Lee, Adam Rich. You had a ranger, a cavalier, acrobat, magician, and the premise of on and on. The premise is these kids get into a carnival ride that's called Dungeons and Dragons. Halfway through the ride, they somehow get magically teleported to the realm of Dungeons and Dragons. And then the whole premise of the show thereafter for the next 3 seasons is about them trying to get back to the real world. And then along the way, they're kind of fighting off and saving people whenever they can as they travel around different villages. They're getting guidance from this little dungeon master character who's very similar to Yoda, very coincidentally enough. And they're on the run from like Venger, who's like the force of evil, and there's like a shadow demon or shadow witch or whatever that thing was, and then Tiamat, which is what we see here that I'm showing. You can kind of see him in the back. So, all right. All that said, was this a cartoon that you watched? Did you get into this one at all? How did it sit with you?
This is a great cartoon. I remember when it came out, we were so excited because this really felt like Dungeons and Dragons at the time was still pretty underground as far as this was not a mainstream thing. It was unusual to see like a player's compendium or a monster manual laying around. It was a very small group of people that were actively playing Dungeons and Dragons. This was the first time that I saw Dungeons and Dragons realize like it was going to be something that it had the look. I mean, the characters were right. Overall, this was a fantastic cartoon. Here's a little trivia for you. So Willie Ames, world famous actor, the star of films and shows, including Eight is Enough.
Yes.
So he played the brother of the young white kid? He was in Eight Enough.
Eight Enough, yeah.
Yeah.
He was the youngest one, I think.
Yeah. Adam Rich, that's what that kid's name was.
Oh, I didn't realize that he was in that.
Yeah, they're both in Eight is Enough. He still plays the little kid. I mean, it takes place not too long after this, I suppose. So
I think it came out before this. I think Eight is Enough was like late 70s, if I'm not mistaken.
I have no idea.
Pull it up. We can check that.
All right, I got you right here.
All right, while you do that, let me finish this. Let me just kind of throw in one thing. So about that last episode. So episode 28 was called Requiem, and there's a really cool thing. It's on the DVDs, and I'm not going to show you anymore, but it's on the DVDs. They actually did. So the writer of this was a man by the name of Michael Reeves, and he's the one thing that I always loved about this show is it's kind of corny and stuff. The animation's good. The voice acting I thought was good. It's got really great comedic moments, and the storyline's actually really good. I still appreciate this even as an adult, and it goes back to there are just some great documentaries that were done about this cartoon, and they're all on this DVD set. And the writers were just very passionate. They were trying to do things that weren't being done at the time, and they were constantly hitting this wall of censorship and trying to work around the censorship. And how do we show and really touch on some of these themes when everybody says that we can't? And so the final episode never came out. And I remember there's kind of like this old myth, I guess, or wise tale. I don't know what you would call it. But a lot of people say, oh, I remember when they finally went home. I remember the last episode. And the truth is, they never went home. And the last episode is called Requiem, and they are given an opportunity, finally, in that episode that never aired, to finally go home. I'm not going to tell you if they do or not. You can go out there and look it up. The script is out there. You can read the script. The DVD, they actually did a audio drama of the script itself. And then there's a YouTuber out there, if you want to look it up too, who's actually put the comic book form of this and overlaid the audio drama on top. So it's not animated, but it is like it's like somebody reading a comic book, and you can follow along with the pages, and you can kind of see the final fate of these characters and whether or not they make it home. So all that's really great stuff. I think at some point we're going to go ahead and we're going to talk about all of that, I think, on a special episode of The Basement. And so, sorry, this is one of our viewers just asked, hey, so what are we talking about? We're talking about this here. This is the complete animated series for Dungeons and Dragons. It's on DVD. Out there on YouTube, you can find the final episode that never aired as well. And if you want to kind of see what happens to them, you can do that. All right, what was the verdict? 8 is enough? When did that come out?
77 to 81. So you are correct, sir. Circle gets the square. You know quite a bit about the Wonder Twins, and 8 is enough. That's what I've learned today.
Yeah, I don't know if either one of those is something to hang your hat on, but I'll take it. I'm okay with it. All right, let's move on because we're going to talk about Lord of the Rings just quickly, very quickly, because there's plenty of references in here, and this is, again, another podcast. So the reference says, Daggerath was a word in Sindarin, the Elvish language J.R.R. Tolkien had created for Lord of the Rings. The word Daggerath means battle, but Tolkien had spelled the word with just one G, not two. And I want to talk just quickly about the language because as part of this research, it was very interesting to me. I didn't realize this is a whole, he really went out and made an entire language. And you could speak this if you really wanted. It's like Klingon now, right? You can go and take a college class on how to speak.
Right? You didn't know this.
No, I didn't. I didn't realize that he'd spent this much time on it.
Books. I mean, he really was. There were no details that he didn't build an extensive backstory for. It's not just the languages of the book, the whole world.
Yes.
I mean, the maps and the level of detail that are in the maps that in the first editions, you can find the earlier edition you can find of the trilogy of Lord of the Rings, the better. I mean, it just feels, even though the words don't change, some of them have lost their artwork along the way and the like. But yeah, just like Klingon, you can go learn this language.
Yep. No, and he started this language back in 1910, and it kind of went through a number of iterations. It's primary, and we're talking about the Elven language. So the Elven language itself, and the history is, the language itself is called Kenya, and then the elves left. This is all part of Lord of the Rings. They left. Some of them came back. They ended up adopting Sindarin, which is kind of like a dialect of Kenya. So it gets really complicated. And there are other dialects, not all elves speak the same exact version of Kenya, but their core language for the Elvish language is Kenya. And that was really inspired by a combination of Finnish. There was some Latin, some Greek, some Welsh. I mean, he kind of threw all these different things together to kind of make up this Elvish language.
Welch?
Yeah, Welsh.
It's
Welsh. Like Welch's grape jelly.
What is happening?
Do you know what this is?
Albert just showing a picture of a random brunette with...
No, this is Enya.
Oh, it's Enya.
So
Charlie Day board where you're like, okay, we're at Ready Player One,
right,
and then connects to that, and then this connects to that, and next we're going to be talking about Twinkies.
Yep, it's not hard to get there to Twinkies from Ready Player One, and nor is it hard to get to Enya. So in the Lord of the Rings movies, and I forget which one it is, she did a song called "May It Be," where she actually sings in Kenya. And the lyrics are out there. You can go look them up. You can listen to it.
Wasn't it nominated? I thought one of the songs from Lord of the Rings was nominated.
It probably was. I mean, it was a pretty big movie. It was a pretty big song. And I remember...
You've heard of it.
Peter Jackson really wanting her in this, or wanted her to sing, or maybe it wasn't Peter. I would assume it's Peter Jackson. Wanted her voice somehow singing when she got to the elves because of just the music that she had done. And, I'm a big Enya fan. I'm not afraid to say that. I don't know. It was just a cheap way to get Enya on the screen here.
Huh, I see that.
Did he get nominated?
Was it Into the West? Was that the name of the song?
No, it would have been May It Be.
No idea.
All right. We're going to move on. We don't got time for this.
Negative.
All right. We're going to wrap up with Tomb of Horrors.
Okay.
We got to get this done in 14 minutes because I don't want to do a 2-hour episode here. Okay. Tomb of Horrors, 1978, written by Gary Gygax. It was primarily made for characters levels 10 through 14. I don't know if it's it actually says that on the front of the module. This is the front of the original, and I don't see that on there. But yeah, levels 10 to 14. So by no stretch, it's not for your beginning characters by any means whatsoever. And there's just quickly, I want to read the story, and I'm not going to read the references because he mentions it throughout. But at least in the dungeon here in the module, it says the legend of the tomb is an old story with many parts, some of which may be lost or obscured. Characters attempting to glean special information by consulting sages or through legend lore spells may still have difficulty obtaining as much background as they desire, for the scraps of information are often minimal and mystical. And so, right out of the gate, Gary Gygax is painting this picture of like this place is very hard to find. It's a legend. Most people don't know that it even exists. I guess to kind of just high level talk about this dungeon, I have played it once. It was not fun for me. Like, we went through this thing many times, and all we did was constantly die. And if you read the adventure, it's almost like it's set up that way. Like, this was purposeful. It was intentional for that.
I get to said on several occasions that was the intent of this.
Yes.
It was almost to be played, because you could either build it into a world that you already had, but it was really designed to be a one-off with specific characters, and even gives you a rule set specifically for that.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of the type of module that was created in order to just see the creative ways you could die and to see how far you could make it into the Tomb of Horrors. Because, I mean, even I believe that they even mentioned in Ready Player One, there's no random monsters in this module at all.
Right.
Right? You can avoid them if you know where they're at. There are clues, but they really don't help you too much. I think there's 5 or 6 photo inserts that come with a module to help explain some of the clues. But ultimately, this was, by definition, designed for overconfident players. Right?
Yep.
Just humble them.
It was a humbling adventure, that's for sure.
At least in its first iteration, because I believe there's like 5 different versions of Tomb of Horrors. But you would know better than me.
I don't know if there were. I don't know that actually. I don't know if there were different. I mean, there's a sequel.
No. There is a sequel, but there is like a 5e edition of this where some elements are taken up. And so this has been played a couple of times at like the Dungeons and Dragons annual convention, and different rules had to be made as players were playing through this module, and Gary Gygax would actually answer them and tell them how to resolve their problems. Because some players, ultimately, when you have a universe of D&D players playing this incredibly difficult module with a whole bunch of different dungeon masters leading them through it, they're going to come up with creative ways to beat it. Did you happen to read any of those while you were doing your research to find out the most creative ways that people beat this module?
No, I didn't get into that far.
So there was a series of dwarves that all they did was max out their ability to construct and dig out traps, and they manually dug through the thing over a series of 3 weeks of real-time gameplay in order to get to the end of it.
So they burrowed their way all the way to the very end? Is that what you're saying? Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
No, that would suck if I was a dungeon master and my characters were doing that.
Yeah.
That would not be fun. So what I thought we would do for this one, because I had a couple different ways that I wanted to approach it. I thought it'd be probably the best bang for the buck to kind of just talk about what Parzival was seeing and kind of show you from the dungeon, at least from the module perspective, what he was going through. Now, mind you, so just a couple things about this dungeon. There's a ton of traps.
Currently displaying the map of the Tomb of Horrors.
This is the actual map, and this is the map that Parzival would use. It was, and a lot of the maps for the dungeons and the modules at the time were like this. They were on the inside covers of the modules themselves, and they were always in this blue. I don't know why that was the case, but that's how it was. But yeah, what I've got up here is the actual map that has everything exposed in terms of where the secret doors are and the secret traps, and there are a number of traps everywhere. I think almost to the count of like 17, 27. I don't know. I was sitting there counting them all, and I lost track of it. But if you fell down one of these pits, they were like 10 feet deep. You would roll 1d6 to determine how many spikes you took. You would either take 1, 2, or 3 spikes. And then if you rolled a 4 through 6, then you didn't take any. You weren't wounded by the spikes. But then if you took a 1, 2, or 3, you had to roll a saving throw versus poison. And if you failed that saving throw, you were just dead. That's it. Right? You were done. You couldn't play. Your character's gone. Level 14, all the time, money you invested into it, they were dead. There was no way coming back.
There are traps that have no saving throws in the game.
Oh, yeah. There was like an instant death. Right.
And I think there's one right at the beginning, because there's only there's 3 entrances to the Tomb of Horrors, 2 fake ones, 1 real one.
Yep.
Right. You had to be a mad genius amount of investigating. Like if you didn't know you were actually entering the Tomb of Horrors for the module of Tomb of Horrors, unless you accidentally got to the right one first, you're definitely dying. Like
Yeah.
because people don't typically take the actions that would be necessary to avoid the traps in the two false doors. You wouldn't do that, but or at least I wouldn't. But I'm a
Nope.
terrible player, so yeah, you have to take your time. This is intended to be a cerebral module, right? And even with that, you're going to need a little luck. There are clues throughout, and like we talked about earlier, some of the clues that are afforded to the players, if they're able to find them, are far more complicated than anything in Ready Player One. Like, no chance. If it took Parzival 5 years to get to the Tomb of Horrors, it would have taken him 6 centuries without him having the benefit of this map on him.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, you would have to have kind of what you mentioned earlier, like when we first kind of started off the show. This thing is so dangerous that you can almost make a strong case for why he would have to use it because he talks about it. He's like a third level character. He's got no armor. Doesn't really have much. He would have easily died within seconds of any one of these initial traps or encounters.
But his rationale is strong. We've done the same thing. Like if you have an expendable character, that dude is fodder. Go out there and just
Take one for
die
the team, buddy.
over
Yep.
and over and over again. And every time you die, we learn a way that you died so that we can get better. And once we get to the point we need to, well, you get in the background and all,
Yep.
you're just gonna have to play Leroy Jenkins for a little bit.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. All right, let's see. So this is the so Parzival talks about what the entrance looks like and the rocks and the formation of it and all that. This is from the module again. This is on the inside flap of it. This is essentially what he was looking at when he was looking at the planet of Ludus and trying to pinpoint an area that looked like the entrance to the Tomb of Horrors. And so this is what he
Yeah.
would have seen here.
How they didn't find it again.
I
Oh my
know.
god.
You don't like
There's
that. I get
no
it.
way you couldn't find this. People are finding things on Google Earth of like people doing all kinds of inappropriate things.
Yep,
Surely
that's true.
somebody would have seen this on planet Ludus.
here's so this is location 3. This is what he would have seen. Okay, so when you imagine him
A hallway with
y-
glyphs on both sides and the ceiling.
so this is I'm trying to see if I thought I had this on here, and maybe I don't. Yes, it says the walls of the corridor leading into the tomb were covered with dozens of strange paintings depicting enslaved humans, orcs, elves, and other creatures. Each fresco appeared in the exact location described in the original D&D module. I knew that hidden in the tiled stone surface of the floor were traps and blah blah blah. It goes on and on. But this is when you first come into the entrance. What we're looking at here is what he was seeing. Okay, that's cool. That's area number 3. This is area 14. He mentions the Chapel of Evil, and this is from the module, so you can kind of see the pew there. In the dungeon itself, in the module itself, it says once inside, this is what the characters would see. They will see what is obviously some form of a temple area. There are scenes of normal life painted on the walls, but the people having rotting flesh, skeletal hands, worms eating them, etc. Yet there also depicts various religious symbols of good alignment, and a faint aura of good can be magically detected. What a puzzle. Could the demi-lich actually be of good alignment? And so in here, there's the blue altar. There's an arch of glowing orange, that kind of thing. So again, this was referenced in the novel Ready Player One, as was this one. And this is I think it's the pillar room here. I don't know if I've got this one on here.
Albert shows a room constructed of pillars.
Pillars. Yeah, there's not a lot to this one. Okay, so here's one. Now we're looking at the face of the great green devil. And this is where that black hole is the sphere of annihilation, essentially what that is. And so if you got too close, you're done. It just suck you up, kill you. I mean, not really, but you were probably likely going to die. It's also the background, if you can see it.
Way to see the background of his green screen, which is exactly the same as the photos he's showing.
So this room is location number 6 on the map, and it wasn't mentioned in the novel, but the picture that I've got up to the right of it is from the Ready Player One movie, and so this was kind of their way to pay homage to the Tomb of Horrors because it wasn't depicted in the movie in any way. they at least use the Great Green Devil face on the back of the van that the all of our characters in the movie are in the very last battle in the Oasis. So in this room, it says the other fork of the path leads right up to an evil appearing devil face set in a mosaic at the corridor's end. It shows show players graphic number 6. The face has a huge O of a mouth, and it is dead black. The whole area radiates evil and magic if detected for. The mouth opening is similar to the fixed sphere of annihilation, but it's about 3 feet in diameter. Plenty of room for those who wish to leap in and be completely and forever destroyed. There you go. You go into that, you're not coming out. So, and then finally, this is Acererak here. So from the module, the picture on the left here, it shows kind of like I don't know what that is. I guess it's like a coffin of some sort. And you can see the dust there. That's where the bones had deteriorated. There's the skull. You've got some crazy pagan devil worshiping symbols there in the background, as mom would say. And then on the right-hand side, you've got a skull, and that's kind of a zoom-in close-up of the skull itself of Acererak. And so you can see the gems in its eyes. You can see the diamonds and rubies and stuff that make up its teeth. But that's all that's left of him in the module. But in the book, obviously, when he comes into the other room, which, by the way, that room, I'm going to pull this back up here on the map. I'm showing the map now, but on room 33, which is kind of right down here, that's where the tomb is at. The novel takes place here in this big room, number 25. Excuse me. So you can see the dais is right there. And then here is the throne itself, that little...
It points to the south side of the room.
So this is where he makes his way to. And then eventually and why he didn't go this way to get to the tomb, I don't know, but that's, whatever. But yeah, so this is where he eventually gets to and is able to have the jousting tournament, if you will, with Acererak. So let me go back to Acererak, because I did want to talk about him. And so just quickly for Acererak, there is some background in the module about him. It says, ages past, a human magic user or cleric of surpassing evil took the steps necessary to preserve his life force beyond the centuries he had already lived, and this creature became the Lich Acererak. Over the scores of years which followed, the Lich dwelled with hordes of ghastly servants in the gloomy stone halls of the very hill where the tomb is. Eventually, even the undead life force of Acererak began to wane, so for the next 8 decades, the Lich's servants labored to create the Tomb of Horrors. Then Acererak destroyed all of the slaves and servitors, magically hid the entrance to his halls, and went to his final haunt, while his soul roamed strange plains unknown even to the wisest of sages. So that's the entrance, and that kind of gives you some background on who this character was, I guess. And there's all kinds of stuff in there. We're not going to get into it. I mean, there's plenty of things, and essentially it would kill you, right? If you got anywhere close. And if you touch the skull, it would teleport you like anywhere from 100 to 600 miles away. And you would have to, that was not even the worst thing that happened to you. You were then placed on a curse was placed upon you. And anytime you rolled dice or something, terrible things would happen to you from that point on whenever you played games. If you were ever to beat him, his magic or his treasure was 10 gold pieces, 3 huge gems, 50,000 gold pieces. There was in an emerald, a black opal worth 100,000 gold pieces, 12 potions, 6 scrolls, 1 ring, 1 rod, 1 staff, 3 miscellaneous magic items that you could make up as a dungeon master, 1 +4 sword of defending, and 2 cursed swords, and 1 cursed spear of backbiting. So there you go. That's kind of what was up, I guess, in the module itself for Acererak and what you were up against. Seems like an insurmountable task. I don't know that anybody, I'm curious, I don't know anybody that actually ever played this and made it through. I've got a really good friend of mine named Jack McCoy, who's been wanting me to, he's like, I've got this. I'll run you through it. We can play it. I may take him up on that offer still. I just don't know if we have the time to do all of that, but I would love to play this again and play it for the first time to some extent, and see if we can just honestly, truly, sincerely get through this module. If it really was just something that was meant to humble you and put you to bed.
You're not making it. Just so you know. And we really haven't even gone into the really intense traps. I think the problem that you would have when running through the module today is the same problem we'd have, is that it's become so famous. It would be hard to find some hardcore D&D players who weren't familiar with the module, who didn't know where most of the big traps are. Just like you've given away like 4 of the big traps. I gave away 3 of them. I mean,
yeah.
you've got that much on you, it's not going to be the same experience. It can't be. If you look at what I find funny as you do research and we're doing some homework reviewing this, is the number of people that were upset by the different types of traps that were in this game, because it wasn't just about the number of traps, the way there's really creative traps in this game that don't exist in other modules. There's some where you hit the trap and your clothing and all of your armor
It's gone.
Doom, and then you play naked for the remainder. There's others that do gender switching, which has gotten way more comments online probably than any of the traps, because there's probably like I think 3 or 4 spells that are going to be able to turn your character back, but puts players in a position where they need to continue to play through the RPG as the opposite sex. So there's people that are just enraged that these characters they spent this much time on, now they're just going to basically have to flip their gender and play in character for the remainder of the game.
Yeah.
I can care less.
I mean, it's just
All
it's
my
so
kids
crazy.
are fairly metrosexual, so
Maybe. I mean, that's probably the way to go. I don't know. I'd love to do this. I'd love to play it, even knowing the traps, just to have the experience. And we could always just role play our way out of this thing too. So I don't know. We'll maybe take Jack McCoy up on that offer. He's again itching to get a gaming session going just to play it. So I think it'd be fun. Okay, well, if you stuck with us this long, we've hit the 2-hour mark, and I'm going to call time of death at 2:04. So we'll end it here. We'll obviously, we talked about, I guess, what's coming up in episode 9. I don't have a lead into that, but he's about to walk out of there. He sees the shadowy figure, and we'll get into him meeting Artemis for the first time in chapter 9. So that'll be coming up next week. Okay, before we go, I got a couple things. I'm calling this the scoreboard. I was trying to put a name to this, and this is the best thing I could come up with, so apologies if this is just really dumb. But the scoreboard is where we'll talk about anybody that's provided iTunes reviews or feedback in one way or the other, positive or negative. And I just want to say thank you to JDR2000, who gave us a review just this past Tuesday. 5-star review on iTunes says, "Keep it coming. RP2 is on the way." So thank you for reaching out, and thank you for providing the feedback. It's always great to hear that. And I wanted to start off the show, and I probably should have done this, but I want to say thank you to everybody that has already given us feedback, and I didn't capture all of it via social media, and people that just outreach to me directly and said, "I'm glad the show's back. I've been waiting this long," and that kind of thing. That's all been very humbling. So thank you everyone for that. And then lastly, I guess to kind of as a big show of appreciation, Danny P is one of our Patreon members, so he pledged the $5 a month one. So thank you. I don't know what we're gonna do there, but we've talked about a couple things that I want to do that are Patreon exclusives. That is still in the works. We will definitely do that. But to pay $5 a month for us to keep this on the air, I think says a lot about you, and certainly I can't thank you enough for doing that. So thank you, Mr. Danny P. Hope that's it.
Thanks, Danny.
Yeah, that's really awesome. Will, I know you're a Patreon member now too, so thank you.
Do you know how many hot dogs you can buy for $5 a month over at All American?
It's Great American Hot Dog. Get it right.
Whatever.
What's funny is when you go to the Patreon page, the $5 thing says something like, what about it? It's the same cost of a $5 sub. I may update that now too. I'll figure out how many Great American Hot Dogs you could get at 39 cents plus tax, and just make that the equivalent used for the $5 mark.
It's 11.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate you doing the homework there. If you want to find us, we'll put all the way to contact us here in the show notes. But I think that's going to do it for us this week. Will, any final words, any final thoughts before we get out of here and call this thing a show?
No, that was a blast. I knew at some point that we were gonna go full D&D, and I was just gonna just give you rope and see how crazy long that went on. But congratulations, sir. We're only an hour or two. Well done.
Yeah, I actually reeled it in. I had a lot more in my show notes, but we're not going to get into it because we don't have time.
Get most your load on the Wonder Twins.
Yeah, that's right. A lot of Wonder Twins in this episode, so you're welcome. So hence the title, Wonder Twin Powers Activate. Okay, that's going to do it for us. We will see you guys next week with episode 0009. The views and opinions of the Basement hosts are of our own and are not in any way affiliated with Random House or Ernest Klein. All quotes, music, sounds, trademarked, and copyrighted material referenced in the show are owned by the respectful companies and creators and are used by the Basement as fair use for entertainment purposes only. It would take me a month to read this whole disclaimer, but sad to say, I don't have that kind of time.
Amasehu Mahayaku.